And what if there was a truth so profound, so powerful, that it could dissolve all human conflicts, fears, and separations? And if this truth had been written, not on papyrus or stones, but in the very atoms of the universe? Most of us sense, even if vaguely, that there is something more behind the surface of existence. There is a frequency, a subtle vibration that connects all things, like an invisible thread linking hearts, galaxies, particles, and consciousness. This vibration has a name: love. But not love reduced to desire, to need, or to attachment. I speak of a love that is a creative force, cosmic intelligence, and the essence of everything that breathes. A forgotten tablet, lost in time, but engraved in the core of every being. The ancient traditions spoke of sacred tablets, revelations that contained the codes of life. Moses descended with the Ten Commandments. Hermes Trismegistus wrote the Emerald Tablets, but there is another tablet that has never been found physically because it does not manifest as stone or paper. It is the tablet of universal love. Few knew of its existence, even fewer dared to touch it, and only one understood it in its entirety: Jesus of Nazareth. This tablet is not religion, it is not doctrine, it is not a text, it is a vibration, a teaching that can only be deciphered by those who live beyond the ego. Therefore, the world forgot it, although it has never ceased to emit its silent sound. Imagine a principle so comprehensive that it could explain everything from the movements of galaxies to the pulsing of a love-stricken heart, a hidden code, yet always present, a love that predates time and transcends form. Most philosophies speak of duality, light and shadow, good and evil, matter and spirit. But the tablet of love does not recognize this separation. For it, everything is an expression of the One. This is its first lesson. Love does not exclude, it includes. It does not divide, it integrates. It does not judge, it understands. That's why it's so difficult to be lived in the modern world. It demands the death of the ego and the birth of the awakened soul. The ancient Egyptians spoke of a cosmic order called Ma'at: harmony, balance, justice, and love. Not coincidentally, the heart was weighed on a scale after death. For them, a light heart was a sign of a life lived in rhythm with the universe. The same symbol appears among the Essenes, a mystical group to which Jesus was possibly linked. The Essenes saw love as a law of nature, not just a feeling, but a path of integration with higher forces. Their writings spoke of the great unity, where everything cooperates with everything, where every gesture has cosmic reverberations. The tablet of love was taught in the subtext, passed on orally, whispered in the silence of the deserts. In Mesopotamia, in the Sumerian epics, the roots of this wisdom were already intuited. In little explored passages, there was talk of gods who created not by force, but by harmony. The universe was seen as a symphony where each being has a role, and love, even if not named as such, was the vital breath that provided cohesion. But over time, this teaching was corrupted. Love became a currency of exchange, a bond of possession, a tool of control. The purity of the principle was lost. The tablet was forgotten, covered up by power codes. Only fragments remained scattered in esoteric and mystical traditions. In ancient Greece, philosophers such as Empedocles and Plato hinted at love as an elemental force. Empedocles spoke of two forces that governed the cosmos: love, philia, and discord, nekos. For him, love united the elements, while discord separated them. Plato, in his Symposium, describes love as a bridge between the human and the divine, a ladder that elevates the soul from physical beauty to the contemplation of essence. But even these glimpses were not enough. The world needed someone who would not only speak of the tablet, but become the living tablet itself. That's where Jesus comes in. Not as the founder of a religion, but as the manifestation of love in human form. He did not come to preach a new doctrine. He came to reveal what already existed before time. Love as the supreme law of the universe. Each of his gestures, each healing, each word, was a fragment of the lost tablet being reactivated. When he touched lepers, when he ate with sinners, when he forgave his tormentors, he reminded the world of what it had forgotten. that love is absolute, unlimited, and unconditional, that it does not choose the deserving, it simply flows. The reason why few understand the depth of Jesus' teaching is because they expect formulas and rules. But the tablet of love cannot be memorized, it can only be felt. It reveals itself in the silence of the heart, in the surrender of the ego, in communion with the whole. It is beyond logic, beyond language, beyond conventional morality, and precisely because of this, it is revolutionary. It dismantles systems, breaks hierarchies, dissolves fears. It uncovers the human being and invites them to love as if they had never been hurt. Jesus did not speak directly about the tablet because it did not need to be taught. It needed to be lived. He knew that words would be distorted. Therefore, he lived in a way that his actions spoke louder than any theological treatise. When he said, "Love one another as I have loved you," he was not giving advice. He was revealing a code. This, "as I have loved you," is the secret password. It is the activation point of the tablet. Whoever loves at this level transcends duality, escapes the prison of the ego, and enters into communion with the primordial vibration of the universe. Humanity, however, was not yet ready. The tablet was forgotten again. Love was encapsulated in doctrines, reduced to fragile feelings, distorted by interests. But it never ceased to exist. It pulses in every sunrise, in every compassionate gesture, in every welcoming glance. It is in the subtext of the scriptures, in the smiles of strangers, in the tears of those who feel too much. It is in you. It is in me. It is in everything. Just remember. Today, more than ever, we feel the call of the tablet. Amid global crises, emotional collapses, and shallow spiritualities, there is a whisper that insists, return to love. Not just any love, universal love. The one that does not seek return, that does not demand validation, that simply is. This is the forgotten principle, the key to everything, the foundation of life. And there is only one way back, to reactivate this tablet within us. Jesus showed us how. Now, it's up to each one to decide if they are ready to remember. Since the dawn of time, humans have looked to the sky in search of answers. The order of the stars, the cycles of the moon, the movement of the planets, everything seemed to follow an invisible plan, a higher intelligence organizing chaos into harmony. And behind this order, many ancients claimed there was a language, a code. But few dared to say that this code was not made of numbers, symbols, or equations, but of something even more subtle: love. Not the emotional and conditional love we're accustomed to, but a structural force, a principle that keeps everything together. A love that is more physical than thought, more scientific than mystical, truer than any doctrine. It doesn't just exist, it governs. If gravity keeps the planets in orbit, universal love keeps souls connected. This is not a poetic metaphor, it is an energetic truth. Love is not an emotion generated in the brain. It is a primordial frequency that emanates from the source. It is the quantum glue of the universe, the vibrational pattern that organizes, nourishes, sustains, and directs everything. What seems like chance or luck is, in reality, synchronicity driven by this vibration. When a human being aligns with this frequency, they don't need to force anything. Everything flows. The board of universal love is the record of this frequency, an invisible, pulsating manual that governs laws much higher than those written by men. Contrary to what many believe, the universe is not indifferent. It responds to the vibration we emit, and among all possible vibrations, fear, anger, guilt, pride, none has as much transformative power as love. Modern quantum physics is beginning to grasp this as it studies how intention influences the field. Experiments like quantum entanglement or the observer suggest that consciousness shapes reality. And love, in this context, is the purest form of active consciousness. It does not judge, it only embraces. It does not compare, it only integrates. That's why, when a person vibrates with genuine love, they transform not only their own life, but also the field around them. This field, which some call the morphic field, others ether, akasha, or unified field, is the grand fabric from which everything is made, and love is the vibrational pattern that organizes it. When Jesus said that the kingdom of heaven is within us, he was pointing directly to this inner field. The tablet of universal love is not somewhere distant, it is within us, waiting to be reactivated. It is a coding imprinted on the soul, which only reveals itself when the ego quiets and the heart takes control. And when that happens, the impossible becomes natural, and separation disappears. The ancients knew that everything in the universe vibrates, and that vibration creates form. The sacred sound, the verb, the creative word, all point to the same principle. Vibration is the matrix of reality. And love is the highest and most orderly vibration. Therefore, the tablet of love is not a spiritual metaphor, but a real code, even if invisible to the physical eyes. Those who understand it do not need to control the world, for they live in resonance with the source. They do not react, they simply respond with wisdom. They do not force, they simply allow. And in this allowing, they perform silent miracles. This is the difference between human laws and cosmic laws. Human laws are based on fear, punishment, and separation. Cosmic laws revealed by the tablet are founded on love, collaboration, and unity. The former leads to war, the latter to communion. And when we look at Jesus' teachings with not religious but energetic eyes, we realize that everything he taught was a revelation of this cosmic code. Whatever you do to the least of my brothers, you do to me. This phrase is pure vibrational physics. It reveals that we are all connected by this loving field. What is done to another resonates within us. Separation is an illusion. Love is reality. But why has this code been forgotten? Because the human mind, dominated by the ego, fears love in its purest form. Love demands surrender, submission, truth. It does not allow manipulation. It dissolves masks. And so, throughout history, control systems have preferred to indoctrinate the masses with fear and guilt rather than teaching the language of love. Thus, the tablet was distorted, hidden under rules, dogmas, and beliefs, but it never stopped pulsing. And today, with the collapse of old structures, it begins to emerge again, subtle, but irresistible. Science is increasingly close to recognizing that consciousness is fundamental to existence. Research in neuroscience, quantum physics, and biology point towards a non-local organizing intelligence. And when this intelligence is observed from the inside out, it reveals itself as love. Not a fragile love, but a creative power, a loving consciousness that does not impose, but proposes. This is the table that Jesus accessed in its entirety. He did not come to establish a new religion. He came to remind us of who we are and how the universe works. When we understand this, everything changes. Love ceases to be just an ideal and becomes an energetic practice. It's not about liking everyone, but vibrating in compassion, in unity, in non-resistance. It's about letting go of control and trusting the flow. The board of love teaches that each being is a cell of the same body. When we hurt others, we weaken the whole. When we heal, everyone strengthens. This is the true miracle, realizing that there are no others, just different expressions of the same love. And then, a new question arises. How to align oneself with this tablet? The answer lies in simplicity, presence, gratitude, listening, surrender. There is no need to know the mysteries of the universe to access it. Just silence the internal noise and listen to the subtle melody of the heart. Just act kindly when the ego wants to attack. Just forgive when everything wants to punish. Just love when the world tells you to fear. Each gesture, each choice, each thought is an opportunity to rewrite reality with the calligraphy of love. This is how love becomes the law of the universe, not by imposition, but by revelation. It already governs everything. We are the ones who forget. The tablet of universal love does not need to be created, only remembered. And when the memory awakens, everything changes. The external reality reorganizes, paths open, encounters become sacred. Love, then, ceases to be sought and starts to be lived. It is not the destination. It is the path, the map, and the starting point. Before the words of Jesus echoed through the deserts of Galilee, before the tablet of universal love became alive in flesh and gestures, men and women in various parts of the world were already touching, even if in fragments, the edge of this mystery. They were called wise, mystics, initiates, visionaries. They didn't all speak the same language, nor did they share the same traditions, but in their words, rituals, and silences, there were echoes of the same primordial love. They were guardians of a wisdom that transcended borders, that recognized in the cosmos a great unity, and, in the human being, a spark of this whole. The tablet was already whispering to the ears of those who knew how to listen. Pythagoras, long before being remembered solely for his theorem, was an initiate in the mysteries of Egypt and Chaldea. To him, everything was number, but not in a quantitative sense, rather qualitative. Numbers revealed harmony, proportion, beauty, and above all, love. The music of the spheres, as he called it, was the symphony that the stars silently intoned in the sky. And this music could only be understood by those who lived in consonance with justice, purity, and love for all. Pythagoras believed that love was the principle that united the parts to the whole, the soul to the body, the individual to the community, and the spirit to the cosmos. His school, in Crotona, did not train mathematicians, but alchemists of the soul. Hermes Trismegistus, the legendary master who merged Egyptian wisdom with Greek, imparted in his emerald tablets knowledge that touched the divine. His famous axiom, as above, so below, revealed the essence of the tablet of universal love. For Hermes, everything is mind, and everything vibrates, and love is the vibration that harmonizes opposites. He taught that the universe is a mirror, where each part reflects the whole, and that the true initiate does not seek to escape from the world, but to penetrate it with eyes illuminated by the consciousness of the One. Hermes understood that love is the only force that can unite light and shadow without conflict, truth and mystery without rupture. In the distant land of China, Lao Tzu silently walked among mountains and valleys, leaving behind a trail of wisdom that still echoes today. The Tao, the path, is unnameable but deeply loving in its essence. The Tao does not judge, does not force, does not impose. It flows, just like universal love. When Lao Tzu says, "The wise man acts without acting and teaches without speaking," he is talking about the power of silent love, the kind that does not demand recognition, but transforms everything it touches. For him, love is like water, gentle but capable of shaping stone, invisible but indispensable to life. Lao Tzu taught the return to simplicity, to the natural, to the essential, and at the center of it all was love, not as desire, but as alignment with the nature of being. Zoroaster in ancient Persia spoke of a struggle between light and darkness. However, this struggle was not external, it was internal, vibrational. Love, represented by the wisdom of Ahura Mazda, was the light that needed to be cultivated through good thought, good word, and good action. He taught that every human choice radiated cosmic consequences. Ethics and love were not just moral principles, but transformative forces of the fabric of reality. For him, the tablet of love was the very battlefield of the soul. Whoever chose to love, chose to create light in the world. In India, the Vedas spoke of a primordial unity, the Brahman, from which everything emanates. The relationship between Atman, the individual soul, and Brahman, the whole, could only be restored through devotional love, bhakti. This devotion was not blind submission, but a loving fusion with the divine. Krishna, in the Bhagavad Gita, says that one who sees all beings in oneself and oneself in all beings has achieved supreme knowledge. This vision is pure universal love tablet. When there is no separation, there is unity, and where there is unity, love flows without resistance. This wisdom has spanned centuries in meditation practices, chants, and offerings, symbolic forms of reconnection with the loving source. The Essenes, in turn, represented one of the last links between the ancient initiates and the coming of Jesus. They lived in silence, in communion with nature, in vibrational purity. Their texts spoke of the angel of love as a tangible force, which should be invoked, breathed, and lived. They believed that love healed, not just the body, but the world. Their ceremonies, ritual baths, and diets were not external obsessions, but ways to keep the body and soul in tune with the vibration of love. They were preparing for a new era, where the Messiah would not come to reign, but to remind. Many believed that Jesus was initiated among them, and that his mission was the living continuation of what they envisioned. In the Hebrew tradition, even among the strict Mosaic laws, love appeared as the central commandment. "You shall love your neighbor as yourself" was not a social instruction, but a spiritual one. The true fulfillment of the law was not achieved through external rituals, but through the internal experience of love. The prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, cried out not for sacrifices, but for broken, compassionate, true hearts. They knew that without love, all spiritual practice becomes sterile. The tablet of love already pulsed in their cries, but the hardness of hearts prevented its complete revelation. Among the Mayas, Incas, and original peoples of the Americas, the love for Mother Earth was the ultimate expression of connection with the All. There was no separation between the human and the sacred. The care for nature, the lunar cycles, the offerings to the sun, everything was an expression of love. The concept of in la quech among the Mayas, I am another you, purely expresses the essence of the tablet of universal love. When I recognize myself in others, I cannot harm them. When I see the other as part of me, love becomes the only possible path. Even among the Celtic Druids, respect for the forest, animals, and the cycles of nature revealed a profound understanding of interconnection. They believed that love was the invisible thread that linked the worlds, the visible and the invisible, the spirit and the matter, the living and the ancestors. The tree was a living symbol of this union, with roots in the earth, trunk in the world, and branches in the sky. To love, for them, was to honor all realms of creation. The board of love was written in leaves, rivers, and stones, not with words, but with presence. These initiates, despite being separated by centuries and cultures, intuited the same truth. But all were misunderstood, persecuted, or forgotten. The world was not yet ready for a love so vast, so encompassing, so transformative. And so, the tablet remained fragmented, preserved in chants, myths, symbols, and parables, waiting for the moment when someone would come to live it fully, not just talk about it, but embody it, and that someone was about to come. The journey of these ancients was not in vain. Each one left a spark, a trail, an echo, and all of them pointed in one direction: the arrival of someone who would not only teach universal love, but would become it. Someone who would not only point to the tablet, but manifest it in every gesture. They prepared the field, they planted the seeds, and the time of harvest was approaching. A time when the tablet would cease to be a whisper and become flesh. A time when love would cease to be a promise and become presence. A time called Jesus. In a time marked by religious disputes, imperial domination, and a society steeped in rigid laws, a figure emerged who brought no armies, new scriptures, or political speeches, but who carried within himself the purest vibration of the universe: love. Not love reduced to emotions or rituals, but the love that pulses at the base of all existence. Jesus not only knew the tablet of universal love, he was the living manifestation of this tablet. He did not come to teach a set of rules, he came to remind what the human spirit already knew before it forgot: that love is the only true force, and everything else is an illusion. In every word, look, and gesture, he revealed the frequency of the source which unites, heals, and transforms everything. Unlike the previous masters and prophets, who glimpsed fragments of the tablet in dreams, visions, and spiritual practices, Jesus embodied its entirety. He didn't need to explain love. He was love in action. His healings were not miracles in the common sense, but natural expressions of a consciousness fully aligned with the whole. Where there was fragmentation, he brought unity. Where there was judgment, he radiated compassion. Where there was despair, he sowed hope. Not out of obligation, but because it was impossible for him not to love. Love was his essential nature, his permanent vibrational state. He didn't need to force, convince, or threaten. His presence alone awakened dormant memories in the soul of those who encountered him. The crowds that followed him did not do so only for the physical miracles. There was something deeper happening, an energetic resonance. Those who approached Jesus, even without rationally understanding, felt a peace that did not come from the world. It was as if, in front of him, all masks fell, all pains were embraced, all mistakes forgivable. The board of love does not judge, it only sees, understands, and heals. When Jesus touched the lepers, he not only restored the skin, he restored dignity, returned to the human being the feeling of belonging. And this was infinitely more transformative than any physical healing. The world back then was dominated by fear. Fear of the Roman Empire, fear of religious laws, fear of divine punishment. Jesus, however, was on a different wavelength and invited everyone to do the same. "Do not be afraid," he would say. "I have overcome the world." And this victory was not against external enemies, but over the internal structures of ego, illusion, and separation. The tablet of love teaches that everything is interconnected, that there is no I against another, but only expressions of the same whole. When Jesus taught love your enemies, he was not being naive, but revealing the key to breaking the cycle of pain. Unconditional love breaks the karmic chains and opens space for true freedom. Your parable of the prodigal son is, in essence, a reflection of the tablet of love. The Father does not punish, does not demand, does not require ritual repentance. He simply welcomes. Because in universal love there is no room for rejection, there is only reconnection. Similarly, the adulterous woman was not condemned, but freed. Because Jesus saw beyond the external action, he saw the heart. And the tablet vibrates at the level of the heart, not appearance. His encounters with tax collectors, prostitutes, and outcasts were reality shocks for a society accustomed to exclusion. But for him, no one was unworthy of love, because love does not measure merit. It simply gives itself, offers itself, donates itself. Jesus was not seeking followers, temples, or power. His mission was quieter and more radical, to awaken in dormant hearts the memory of who we truly are. "Ye are gods," he said. Not in a sense of arrogance, but as a reminder that the spark of the source resides in every being, and this spark only fully activates when we vibrate in love. The tablet is this internal reminder, an unwritten code, but engraved in every soul. And Jesus, by living in perfect resonance with it, became a living mirror. Whoever saw him saw their own potential. That's why he said, "Whoever sees me, sees the Father." He was not speaking of an external divinity, but of the unity between creator and creature, possible through love. His mastery over natural laws was not magic, but a result of his harmony with the tablet. Walking on water, multiplying bread, calming storms, all were expressions of a consciousness that saw no separation between spirit and matter. When one is in complete union with universal love, reality responds differently. Limitations dissolve. The impossible bends before the vibration of the source. Jesus did not violate the laws of nature. He revealed them in their highest form, where love is the only organizing principle. His miracles were invitations to remember, not demonstrations of power, but demonstrations of love. In his journey, Jesus did not exclude rituals or scriptures, but transcended them. He read prophecies not as fixed futures, but as potentials to be activated by love. He taught in temples, but also in squares, mountains, boats. Because where there is love, there is a temple. The tablet of love is not limited to a sacred space. It makes everything sacred. The bread, the wine, the sea, the dust of the roads. Everything touched by love becomes a sacrament, and everything lived with love becomes a prayer. This was his liturgy: presence, listening, touch, silence. He transformed every moment into a portal of healing and reconnection. The disciples, even while walking by his side, took time to understand the depth of what they saw. Because love in its absolute form confronts all ego structures. They expected a king, a political liberator, a master of strength. Instead, they received a servant who washed feet, a man who allowed himself to be crucified, a being who died forgiving. This is the pinnacle of the tablet. Love that does not defend itself, does not demand, does not back down. Love that gives itself completely, knowing that this surrender is not weakness, but the supreme expression of divine power. Jesus was the opposite of the world's logic, and for that very reason, he was its cure. Even in the moment of greatest pain, at the height of the cross, Jesus did not break with the tablet. He lived it until his last breath. "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." This sentence is the essence of universal love, deep understanding of others' ignorance, compassion in the face of violence, connection even in separation. He did not just love those who welcomed him. He loved those who betrayed him, denied him, crucified him. Because true love does not depend on the behavior of the other. It flows because it is aligned with one's own essence. And in doing so, Jesus not only showed a way, he reactivated the cosmic memory of who we are. The presence of Jesus on earth was the greatest reminder of the universal love tablet. He did not leave a book, but a frequency. He did not establish dogmas, but a way of life. Every gesture of his is an invitation to transcendence, and each one who resonates with this frequency also becomes a bearer of the tablet. Christ is not limited to a historical figure. He is a vibrational field accessible to anyone who chooses to live in love, and this choice, even today, changes everything. Where there is hatred, love transforms. Where there is pain, love heals. Where there is darkness, love illuminates. And where there is forgetfulness, love awakens. There was something deeply unsettling about the way Jesus loved. It wasn't a decorative love, nor was it an unattainable ideal hung on pretty words. His love was action. It was a direct confrontation with exclusionary systems, with institutionalized hypocrisy, with false spirituality that served appearance more than truth. Jesus didn't come to soften the standards of the time with moral advice. He came to implode the internal structures that kept humanity imprisoned. His love was like an unbreakable mirror, revealing not what people wanted to show, but what they truly were. That's why it was so feared. That's why it was rejected. Because to love as he loved meant to threaten the entire edifice of control and manipulation that upheld the world. He loved the forgotten, the impure, the marginalized, the socially discarded. Not just out of pity, but because he recognized in them the spark of the divine that society had tried to extinguish. He sat at the table with tax collectors and prostitutes, touched lepers, welcomed children. He didn't ask for prior repentance, nor visible transformation. He just loved. Because true love precedes any change. It doesn't wait for improvement to give itself. It gives, so that improvement can happen. This kind of love deconstructed the filters and barriers that the Pharisees had built around God. The sacred for them was separate from the common. For Jesus, the sacred was the common, touched by a loving presence. In his parables, he brought this confrontation with sharp clarity. The Good Samaritan was not just a tale about kindness, it was a direct denouncement of religious and ethnic prejudice. The priest and the Levite, representatives of the official religion, pass by the wounded man. But the Samaritan, hated, impure, heretic, is the one who acts compassionately. The message was clear. It doesn't matter the title, the belief, or the tradition. Without love, everything is empty noise. And where there is true love, there is God. This narrative dismantled the pretense of institutional purity and re-established love as the only criterion for legitimate spirituality. Jesus not only spoke, he lived this love in a non-negotiable way. When he met the Samaritan woman by the well, he broke down barriers of gender, religion, and morality with a single conversation. In dialoguing with her, he recognized her deep thirst for something beyond guilt, and instead of condemning her, he offered living water, that is, love that heals at the root and does not just disguise the symptoms. The board of universal love, when lived, does not reinforce divisions. It dissolves them. But this offends those who base their personal worth on exclusivity, moral superiority, and power over others. That's why Jesus was scandalous. His greatest confrontation was with the Pharisees and Sadducees, religious authorities who controlled the people through fear and appearance. He called them hypocrites, whitewashed tombs, blind guides, not because he hated, but because he loved too much to allow them to continue deceiving themselves and others. Love is not always docile. Sometimes it's firm. Sometimes it raises its voice, overturns tables, points out contradictions. When Jesus purified the temple, he didn't do it out of blind anger, but out of love for the truth. The house of prayer had become a marketplace. The sacred had been sold. Love, upon entering, could not remain silent in the face of such profanity. In confronting the religious and political powers of his time, Jesus knew exactly the risk he was taking. He was not surprised by the persecution, he foresaw it. But he chose to carry on. Because the tablet of universal love does not stand idle in the face of injustice. It is not neutral in the face of oppression. It acts, it confronts, it exposes itself, because it knows that love is only true when it translates into courage. And courage, at this level, is not the absence of fear, but the devotion to what is right even in the face of death. Jesus was not seeking martyrdom, but by loving so radically, he knew that the world, accustomed to walls, exclusions, and hierarchies, would not tolerate his presence for long. The love that he lived also challenged the disciples. It was not easy to follow him. They expected glory, power, earthly victories, and they received the cross, renunciation, humility. When he washed the feet of each one, he broke the logic of command. The master became a servant, the greatest became the least, and in the simplest gesture, he revealed the greatest secret: to love is to serve, not with forced submission, but with inner freedom. Jesus inverted the world's pyramid. For him, the last is the first, the small is great, the weak is strong, the servant is king. And in this paradox, he revealed that love does not seek dominance, but presence. It does not demand obedience, but surrender. His presence was so intense that it made people choose. Either they surrendered to transformation or they fled to maintain their defenses. No one remained neutral. Absolute love is unbearable for those living in illusion. It illuminates too much. It reveals too much. And this light, for those who cling to the shadows, seems threatening. But the truth is that Jesus didn't come to condemn. He came to liberate from fear, guilt, false identity, separation. The tablet of love that he lived didn't require penance, but openness. It didn't demand sacrifice, but presence. It didn't impose standards, but awakened the being. By saying that love for one's neighbor was equivalent to love for God, Jesus collapsed any attempt at religiosity disconnected from real life. He made it clear that there is no true spirituality without practical compassion. Love is not a distant ideal. It is a daily, concrete, demanding practice. Loving others as oneself requires seeing the other as part of oneself. This implies the end of ego, the end of comparison, the end of indifference. And nobody represented this better than he did. Because by loving the entire world, Jesus challenged everyone to do the same, not in words, but in actions, not in prayers, but in deeds. And perhaps the most revolutionary aspect of his love was his openness to human suffering. He did not avoid pain, did not deny suffering, did not mask grief. He wept, he felt, he empathized. And in doing so, he revealed that love does not run from pain. It embraces it. He enters into others' suffering as if entering his own home. He listens, comforts, supports. This vulnerability was his strength. Because love that does not allow itself to be touched by the world's pain is merely a facade. True love descends, incarnates, participates, endures. And it is precisely for this reason that he healed. Not by superhuman power, but by divine compassion. Jesus was, and still is, the greatest silent revolution in history. His love destabilized empires, questioned religions, revealed lies, and planted a new possibility of existence. And all of this without raising a sword, without occupying thrones, without conquering territories. His weapon was presence. His tactic was acceptance. His victory was the resurrection of love in the hearts that dared to believe. And his mission still pulses, because the table that he lived is still active, waiting for those who have the courage to love as he loved, not halfway, not out of convenience, but wholeheartedly, until the end. The crucifixion of Jesus was not just the murder of a righteous man, it was the ultimate symbol of the clash between unconditional love and power structures built on fear, guilt, and separation. When he gave his last breath, the world did not just silence a voice, it tried to erase a vibration. The board of universal love, lived by him in its purest form, was interrupted in its incarnate manifestation. But love does not die. It fragments. It hides. It survives in corners, in small gestures, in the memories of those who dared to feel. However, with his departure, the slow process of dilution, distortion, and forgetting of the most powerful message ever revealed to humanity also began. The first ones who tried to keep alive the essence of Jesus' teaching faced persecutions, exiles, and martyrdoms. The message was too dangerous to be left intact. A love that made no distinction between Jews and Gentiles, men and women, pure and impure, threatened the entire system of religious and political castes. For this reason, over the following centuries, the tablet of love was gradually segmented into doctrines, converted into norms, packaged in liturgies, disguised as institutionalism. What was a living vibration became dead letter. What was an inner revolution turned into an external rule. The love that liberates was gradually replaced by the fear that imprisons. The construction of institutionalized Christian religion had its motivations, contexts, social and political needs. But one cannot deny that in this process, the original essence of Jesus was gradually obscured. The loving Christ gave way to a stern judge. Unconditional grace was swapped for behavioral demands. Spontaneous surrender to love was stifled by promises of heaven and threats of hell. The simplicity of Jesus' gaze was replaced by complex dogmas, mandatory creeds, and hierarchies that the Master himself would never have recognized. And so the tablet of universal love was disassembled, piece by piece. The theology that emerged in the early councils was, for the most part, an attempt to explain, organize, and control the uncontrollable. Love does not fit into formulas. It is not confined to logic. But men tried to codify it, fix it, protect it within doctrinal walls. The result was that the mystery ceased to be lived and began to be discussed. Instead of loving as Jesus loved, they began to worship the figure of Jesus as a distant object. Instead of becoming Christ in attitude, they preferred to build images and altars. What was a path became a cult. What was transformation was converted into worship. And the most tragic thing is that, in the name of this same Christ who brought down walls, fortresses were built. In the name of the love that embraced everyone, wars, crusades, exterminations were initiated. History witnessed atrocities committed by institutions that claimed to represent him, but whose actions were more aligned with power than with compassion. The Inquisition, forced colonizations, persecutions of dissenters and heretics, all of this is proof of how the tablet was shattered. And even among the well-intentioned, the teaching was weakened, turned into moralism, reduced to conventions. The vibration of love was replaced by the obligation of correct behavior. Over time, the figure of Jesus became increasingly divinized and his humanity forgotten. But it was precisely in his humanity that he manifested the fullness of love. By making him unattainable, his path also became inaccessible for imitation. The tablet of love was not delivered as a dogma, but as an example. It was not meant to be idolized, but lived. It was not meant to be adorned in temples, but embodied in attitudes. But few dared to follow him on this narrow path. Many preferred to create doctrinal shortcuts, fences, and exclusions, while love remained in the wings, waiting to be remembered. The truth is that universal love, due to its radical simplicity, becomes unbearable for those who are trapped in the need for control. It dissolves borders, dismantles merits, destroys hierarchies. It levels everyone as children of the same source. And this, for human systems, is threatening. That's why, even among the followers of Jesus, distinctions, segregations, spiritual castes were created. Some considered themselves saved, others lost. Some chosen, others rejected. But the tablet does not recognize such divisions. It just loves. It loves the sinner and the saint, the believer and the skeptic, the pure and the impure, because it knows that all are expressions of the same consciousness. As the centuries passed, texts were edited, translations manipulated, gospels discarded. Writings like those of Thomas, which emphasized self-knowledge and inner light, were set aside. Mysticism gave way to morality. The heart was replaced by the letter, and the path of love was diverted towards outward obedience. But the code of the tablet remains intact, even when unrecognized. It vibrates in silence, in shared pain, in forgiveness that is born without explanation. It survives in small gestures of compassion that escape institutions. It continues to call, even without a voice. In the hidden mystical schools, in underground traditions, in unofficial spiritual practices, the tablet remained alive in secrecy. Christian mystics, Sufis, Kabbalists, yogis, and initiates from various cultures preserved its essence. Not the essence of form, but of vibration. Saint Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, Meister Eckhart, Hildegard of Bingen, among others, touched this flame. Their experiences spoke of direct union with the divine, without intermediaries, without dogmas. They came to live the tablet as Jesus lived, with surrender, silence, presence. But they paid a price. They were silenced, persecuted, misunderstood, because the love that liberates always threatens the shackles of the institution. Even in modern times, we see how much the original teaching has yet to be understood. Many religions continue to impose weight, demands, guilt, penances. They continue to determine who deserves and who does not deserve to be loved. But the tablet of love does not recognize merit, it recognizes essence. It knows that each soul is part of the same whole, and that love is the only way back home. Jesus' message was not a novelty, it was a reminder. But by forgetting this reminder, we return to the darkness of separation. Now, with the collapse of old structures and the awakening of new consciousness, many are beginning to feel the call again. The lost tablet begins to emit its vibration more powerfully. Not in the official words, but in the hearts that burn in silence. Amidst the noise of the world, there are those who hear this call and wish to remember. The love that Jesus lived did not die on the cross. It spread like invisible fragments, waiting for the time to be reunited. And that time is now. The time of remembrance has come, and the pieces of the tablet are, little by little, returning to the surface of human consciousness. After the silence imposed by the institutionalization of faith and the burial of the tablet of love under layers of dogmas, hierarchies, and religious fears, a spark insisted on staying alive. This spark was untamable, for it belonged to the very nature of the soul. From time to time, there were men and women who, touched by this invisible vibration, challenged the systems to remember the forgotten truth. They were not founders of religions, nor did they seek glory. Their lives, marked by simplicity, surrender, and courage, were attempts to reconstruct the fragments of the tablet with the only tool capable of doing so: unconditional love. They were living signs that the flame of Jesus had not been extinguished. It had only retreated into the footnotes of history. Francisco de Assis was one of those beings. He was born in a time when the church had become an earthly empire, with accumulated riches, political powers, and imposing castles. But he chose the opposite. He renounced everything, clothed himself in humility, and set out into the world with a single mission: to love all creatures as siblings. For Francisco, love was not limited to humans. He spoke with the birds, called the sun brother and the moon sister. He saw God in every flower, in every stone, in every wounded animal. He did not recite theologies, but lived the tablet. His life was a silent song of reverence and tenderness. Rejected by many, misunderstood by others, he left a legacy of pure devotion, proving that universal love is a language that transcends reason and ritual. Another breath of the tablet manifested in the fiery heart of Rumi, the 13th century Sufi mystic. His words, imbued with spiritual ecstasy, revealed a profound union with the source. "I am neither in the temple nor in the mosque. I am where love resides," he said. To Rumi, separation was the great illusion. The soul only suffered because it had forgotten its origin. And the way back was love. He did not preach a religion, but a total surrender to the dance of the divine. His poems, overflowing with sacred passion, touched souls without distinction of beliefs. His school was the heart. His temple was the moving body. His altar was the other. And in every word of his, a fragment of the tablet shone. Teresa of Avila, in her interior castle, also dared to break the barriers of form to touch the substance. Living under the rigors of ecclesiastical hierarchy, she plunged into depths that many feared. Her mystical experiences were so intense that they aroused suspicion and persecution, but she didn't stop. She detailed the journey of the soul to the center of itself, where God dwells in silence. For Teresa, love was not a superficial feeling. It was a fire that burned, that purified, that liberated. She spoke of a God who was not satisfied with being worshipped from afar, but who wanted to dwell within the human heart. Her total surrender, her passion for truth, her courage amidst external pressures, rekindled the forgotten vibration of the tablet. Centuries later, in a distant land and under a different tradition, Gandhi was born. A slight man, but with an inner strength capable of moving empires. Inspired by the words of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, by Hindu scriptures and by the teachings of his own heart, he chose to live love as a tool of resistance, not with weapons, but with peace, not with hatred, but with truth. His practice of ahimsa, non-violence, was the concrete manifestation of the tablet in social action. He taught that there is no true victory where love is set aside. His love for the poor, his compassion for adversaries, his courage in the face of imprisonment and death were living flames reigniting the memory of a humanity that had forgotten itself. But not all those who lived the tablet were canonized or recognized. Many were silenced, excluded, or erased from records. Simple women who cared for the sick without ever judging them. Anonymous individuals who renounced revenge and chose forgiveness as a response to hatred. Men and women who, even in times of war, hid and protected lives, motivated by a compassion that transcended logic. All of them, without even knowing, were living parts of the tablet, because universal love doesn't require a stage. It manifests in the smallest, yet powerful gestures of kindness, empathy, and real presence. In every era, the tablet tried to resurface in new forms, adapted to the contexts. In Bach's music, in Van Gogh's painting, in Tagore's poetry, in Martin Luther King's voice, in Mandela's gaze, in each of these there was a spark trying to shine. Many failed, many fell. But even in the falls, love continued to whisper. Because love does not extinguish with failure. It strengthens in it. It learns from pain, grows with rejection, matures in silence. Every attempt to revive it, even if incomplete, helps to rebuild the pieces of the tablet. Because what was divided can only be restored by those who dare to love again. The great pain of these bearers was loneliness. True love is often misunderstood. It confronts, demands renunciation, requires deep listening, real presence. It bothers those who prefer safe indifference to uncertain surrender. Therefore, many of these beings lived in tension, between the internal call and the external rejection, between the ecstasy of communion and the weight of abandonment. But even so, they continued, because they knew, even without words, that they were touching something eternal, that the tablet had chosen them, and that the only possible response was to live faithfully to what they had felt, even if the world did not understand. Each of these figures in their individuality manifested different aspects of love. Francisco revealed tenderness, Teresa, depth, Gandhi, courage, Rumi, surrender, and so many others brought joy, justice, truth, compassion. Like pieces of a puzzle, each one helped reconstruct the complete image of the tablet. They were not perfect, but they were real. They were not divine in the idealized sense, but human in their highest form. And for that reason, they are mirrors for us. They show that we do not need to wait for a new incarnation of love. We can be now what we seek. The tablet of universal love does not belong to an era or a culture. It is an eternal vibration that manifests whenever a human heart decides to love beyond fear. Each act of kindness, each sincere renunciation, each forgiveness offered, each silent compassion, all these are pages of the tablet being written anew. Not in holy books, but in consecrated lives. Love does not need a stage, it needs space. And this space opens up when we empty ourselves of ego and allow ourselves to be filled by the source. The example of all these beings is not a memory of the past, it is a summons to the present. They are not distant, they are here now saying, love is still possible. The tablet still pulses, and you are part of it. There's something in the air, something that can't be explained by the news nor captured by algorithms. It's a quiet restlessness that courses through minds and hearts. A sense that everything we've been taught is crumbling, that the structures we trusted can no longer bear the weight of the questions surfacing from within. This apparent collapse, economic, political, environmental, spiritual, is, in fact, the harbinger of something greater. The birth of a new consciousness. A collective awakening that doesn't happen en masse, but in waves, from being to being. An invisible movement back to the source. And in this silent process, the board of universal love begins to vibrate again, calling those who are ready to remember. Amidst the digital superficiality and chronic anxiety, more people have been feeling an emptiness that nothing seems to fill. Consumption is not enough. Entertainment does not soothe. Formulas do not work. And in this space of disillusionment, something sacred emerges. A quest for meaning that is not found in ready-made answers, but in inner listening. An impulse that comes from within, like a seed breaking through the earth, asking for light. This impulse is the call of the tablet. It does not speak in human languages, but in vibration. And as distractions lose strength, its frequency becomes more audible to those who dare to silence. Universal love is not a new concept, but for the first time in recent history there is a broad, decentralized, and cross-cutting movement that recognizes it as a legitimate language of transformation. In every corner of the planet, people are awakening to a new way of relating to themselves, others, and the world. Spirituality, previously confined to institutions, is now becoming a personal, direct, experiential path. Blind faith gives way to felt experience. And this experience always points to the same place. The love that includes, that unites, that heals. The love that is the fundamental vibration of the universe. Science, in turn, begins to walk side by side with this intuition. Research in quantum physics, neuroscience, epigenetics, and transpersonal psychology reveals that consciousness is not a byproduct of the brain, but a non-local reality that shapes the physical world. Observation modifies the object. Intention alters the outcome. Emotion influences biology. All of this corroborates what the masters have always known. The external world is a reflection of the internal state. And love, as a coherent frequency, harmonizes the field. When we feel genuine love, our body heals, our relationships balance, our vision expands. The tablet, once whispered by prophets, is now beginning to be confirmed by data. With this, a new ethic emerges, an ethic not based on commandments, but on consciousness. The right thing is no longer what is written, but what resonates with the awakened heart. Injustice is not perceived only when the law is broken, but when love is violated. This cosmic ethic does not demand punishment, it demands responsibility. And this responsibility is born from the perception of unity. If the other is me in another form, to hurt them is to hurt myself. This is the logic of the tablet. It does not impose, it reveals, and in revealing, it transforms. Because no one who sees the whole clearly can continue to act as if they were separate from it. Many young people, even without religious reference, are being seized by this consciousness. They feel that there is something greater, even if they cannot name it. They reject rigid structures, not out of empty rebellion, but from an intuition that truth is more fluid. They don't want to belong to systems, they want to belong to love. And in this movement, new practices emerge. Meditation, conscious breathing, sacred dances, listening circles, energy therapies, living food. All of these are attempts, some more effective than others, to align the body, mind, and soul with the frequency of the tablet. This is not a trend, but a slow, organic, inevitable return. What was once considered alternative or esoteric is now moving towards the center, not because the world has become mystical, but because truth, when persistent, pierces any resistance. Companies are starting to talk about purpose, schools are experimenting with emotional education, corporate leaders practice mindfulness, doctors are considering the role of emotional state in diseases, scientists are exploring the effects of forgiveness, gratitude, and compassion on DNA. All of these are initial manifestations of a new era. The tablet is being rewritten in everyday life, not on stone tablets, but in social systems that are starting to vibrate differently. And the most beautiful thing is that this awakening does not require perfection. It is not a call for saints, but for authentic beings, individuals who, even though imperfect, choose love as their axis. Those who do not hide their wounds, but display them with courage, knowing that it is through them that light enters. The new spirituality does not separate the sacred from the profane. It sees God in the kitchen, in traffic, in a tight hug, in a held-back tear. The board manifests wherever there is presence, where there is listening, where there is a willingness to love even when there are no guarantees. That's where the magic begins. That's where reality changes. The ancient world still resists. It still tries to impose its rules, its wars, its logics of scarcity and fear. But it is crumbling, not because the new attacks it, but because the new vibrates higher. Love, as a superior frequency, naturally dissolves structures that do not resonate with it. Lies cannot survive where truth shines. Hate does not prosper where love is lived fully. This is the quiet power of the tablet. It does not need to dominate. It simply exists, and by existing, it transforms. Its revolution is not of slogans, but of frequencies. It is not of armies, but of hearts vibrating in unity. The great challenge of this time is not to confuse collapse with destruction. What is falling is not the world, it's the walls, the barriers that separated us from the source, from ourselves, from others. The crisis is the birth, the chaos is the dilation, the pain is the warning that something new wants to be born. And this new thing will not come from outside, it will come from within. It will not be given by leaders, but awakened by seekers. And each being that awakens will become a point of light, radiating the vibration of the tablet, reminding others that love is not a utopia, it's nature. That to love is not an option, it's a return home. That the journey is not to heaven, it's to the center. We are living the beginning of a new spiritual era. An era where truth will no longer be delegated, but felt. Where the temples will be bodies, the rituals will be the simple gestures, the masters will be those who know how to love deeply. And in this new time, the tablet of universal love will no longer be a hidden mystery. It will be the new alphabet of humanity, a vibrational alphabet made of presence, compassion, listening, and giving. An alphabet that doesn't need translation because it is understood by the heart. We are remembering, we are returning, we are little by little becoming the living tablet ourselves. There is a point in the journey where the quest dissolves, where questions surrender, where the longing to find out there transforms into a silent recognition of what has always been within. This point is not a destination. It is an opening. It is when the seeker realizes that he himself is what he was looking for, that the tablet of universal love is not outside, hidden in secret mountains or ancient texts. It is in the center of one's own being, etched into the fabric of the soul, waiting for the moment to be revealed, not as an idea but as lived existence. This is the apex of the spiritual journey, not to understand the tablet, but to become the tablet. Living like the living board is not about achieving a high and definitive state. It's about choosing moment by moment the frequency of love. It's a practice, not an endpoint. It's the daily decision to love even when unloved, to understand even when misunderstood, to forgive even when the world demands punishment. Being the board is being faithful to the original vibration of the inner Christ, not as a religious symbol, but as a field of consciousness that manifests through active compassion, unwavering presence, and unconditional surrender. Becoming the living board is about relinquishing the ego as commander and allowing love to guide every gesture. This choice is not romantic, it's radical. To love in today's world is an act of silent revolution. When one becomes the plank, one no longer seeks to win arguments, prove points, or ensure superiority. One seeks to embrace the other in their pain, even when they still hurt. One seeks to radiate a presence that heals just by being there. The love of the plank does not impose, does not conquer, does not compete. It just is. It vibrates. And in vibrating, it transforms. Those who choose to live at this frequency must die daily to masks, to games, to defense mechanisms. They need to unlearn what the world has taught about success, value, and happiness. They need to step into the humility of knowing that everything begins in the heart. Being the living board means accepting that there is no line separating the spiritual from the everyday. That making coffee with presence can be as sacred as a prayer. That listening to someone with total attention can be more transformative than reciting mantras. That smiling at a stranger, holding a gaze, offering silence to someone who is crying, all of this is the language of the board. Love doesn't need ceremonies, but availability. It doesn't demand moral purity, but authenticity. Being the board is not about being perfect. It's about being transparent. It's about being whole. It's about being available to the source so that it can touch the world through you. This availability is the true priesthood. Not a title conferred by institutions, but a state of surrender. Every human being who chooses to love radically becomes a channel of the tablet, a walking altar, a living temple, and this priesthood manifests itself anywhere, on the streets, in schools, in hospitals, in offices, in homes. The world doesn't need more gurus. It needs ordinary people who have the courage to love extraordinarily. People who don't wait for permission to be light, who understand that the mission is not in an ideal future, but in this instant, now. This awareness changes everything. It changes the way we see others. Every encounter becomes an opportunity to remember. The other ceases to be a threat, a problem, or an obstacle, and becomes a mirror, a partner in learning, an extension of the same being. Even the most difficult ones, even those that cause pain. The tablet teaches that all encounters are sacred, especially those that challenge us. Because it is in these that love is tested, expanded, and confirmed. To become the living tablet is to stop seeing the world as an adversary and start seeing it as a master. Each situation, an invitation to expansion. Each pain, an opening to truth. And if there is a practice that supports this path, it is silence. Not the silence of omission, but the silence that listens. That welcomes, that allows the source to speak without noise. The tablet does not impose itself with shouts. It reveals itself in the inner space where the ego is silent. It is in the silence of the heart that love manifests itself more clearly. Therefore, the life of the one who becomes the tablet is permeated by pauses, by contemplations, by invisible retreats in the midst of chaos. There is no need to go to monasteries. It is enough to be present in the now, with depth. Every conscious breath is a reunion with the sacred. Every moment lived with surrender is a rewritten page of the tablet. This life demands courage, because being the board is swimming against the current of the culture of haste, judgment, and accumulation. It is making choices that seem senseless to the world's eyes. Forgiving when you're right, giving when you have little, trusting when you've been betrayed. But this courage doesn't come from brute strength. It comes from delicacy. The love of the board is gentle, but indestructible. It moves like water. It contours, infiltrates, transforms from within. Those who live this way carry a strength that doesn't impose, but is unshakable. The peace of those who don't need to win. The strength of those who have already surrendered. And over time, this way of living expands. It transforms relationships. It heals family ties. It rearranges priorities. It inspires others. The living tablet is contagious, not because it talks a lot, but because it vibrates loudly. Those who come close feel it, even without understanding. And gradually, this presence awakens in others the dormant memory. Love is the only thing that multiplies the more you give. It's cosmic math. What is given in fullness returns with abundance, and each person who becomes the living tablet ignites a light in regions where darkness seemed permanent. Each being is a portal, each gesture is an offering. Then comes the moment when you realize that the mission was never to find something outside, but to remember something within. The tablet of universal love, previously seen as an ancient mystery, then becomes flesh, gesture, breath. It becomes you. And in this realization, the search ends, but not as a full stop. It ends as an overflow. There is no longer anything to seek because everything has become expression. Everything is sacred. Everything is love. And the world, previously seen as a battlefield, becomes a garden to be cultivated, with presence, with truth, with tenderness, with the vibration of the tablet, alive and pulsating, in every step, in every word, in every glance. This is the so-called end, not to worship love, but to become it, not to repeat words, but to embody its frequency, not to wait for the new world, but to create it with your own hands. The time of waiting is over, the time of return has arrived, and the return is not to a place, but to an essence. The source calls, the board vibrates, the heart feels, and the soul responds. Here is the final key: to become love, to become a bridge, to become an answer, to become a presence, to become the board, here, now, forever. Mind unfettered, now that you have journeyed with me through this profound revelation of the tablet of universal love, I want to know from you. Which part of this journey touched your heart the most deeply? Have you ever felt, even for a moment, this frequency of universal love vibrating within you? Share in the comments an experience, an insight, or even a doubt. When you comment, you manifest. When you write, you anchor. When you share, you activate the field for others. We are co-creating together a collective consciousness of awakening. Each comment here is a living spark of the board being reactivated in community. Let's build this vibrational field together, with intention, with presence, with love. And if you felt that there is still more to be revealed, you are absolutely right. On your screen now is the next step of the journey, the Book of 33 Steps, the hidden map Jesus left for enlightenment. There, we will unravel a hidden map that Jesus left for the enlightenment of the soul, step by step. It's the direct unfoldment of what you've experienced here. Mind unfettered, this is your time. Love has called you. The board vibrates. And now, the next step is just around the corner. Click and continue this journey. See you there.